Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, we share powerful stories about betrayal, resilience, family secrets, and the unexpected moments that change lives forever. If you've ever been underestimated, abandoned, or forced to rebuild from nothing, today's story will stay with you long after it ends. Trust me, you'll want to hear every second of this one. My name is Emily Carter, though almost everyone has called me Em since basic training. I was 33 years old the Christmas my father told me to leave his house. Not asked, not suggested, told. The strange thing is, that wasn't the moment that broke me. Losing my leg hadn't broken me. Years overseas hadn't broken me. The surgeries hadn't broken me. The physical therapy hadn't broken me. Even hearing the doctors explain exactly how much of my old life was gone forever hadn't managed to break me. No, the thing that nearly destroyed me happened sitting at my father's dining room table while a Christmas ham cooled between us. The Carter family home looked exactly the same as it always had. The same white siding. The same wreath hanging on the front door. The same smell of cinnamon drifting through the hallway. The same family photos lining the walls. Looking at it from outside, nobody would have guessed that everything inside was rotten. I arrived carrying a duffel bag and a cane. The cane bothered me more than I liked to admit. Not because I needed it, because it announced my injury before I said a single word. People noticed it first. Then they noticed me. And after that came the pity. I was tired of pity. My mother, Margaret, opened the door. She smiled politely. Not warmly, politely. There is a difference. My sister Lauren was arranging dishes in the dining room. My younger brother Ethan stood near the kitchen counter. And my father, Robert Carter, sat at the head of the table exactly where he always sat. Like a king guarding a throne nobody had asked him to occupy. Emily, he said, not Em, Emily, formal, distant. I should have recognized the warning. Instead, I walked in carrying gifts. A scarf for my mother. A toy truck for Lauren's son. A bottle of wine. Old habits die hard. When you've spent your entire life trying to earn love, you learn to arrive carrying something. The dinner began quietly. Everyone talked about safe topics. The weather. The new highway project. Property values. Lauren's kitchen remodel. The neighbor's new boat. Anything except the things that mattered. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody asked about the explosion. Nobody asked about the months in recovery. Nobody asked how I was adjusting to life with one leg. And honestly, that part didn't bother me. What bothered me was something else entirely. Nobody mentioned the farm. For 10 years, nearly every extra dollar I'd earned had gone toward helping save my grandfather Henry's bee farm. At least that's what I believed. Every month Robert called with another emergency, a bad season, a broken tractor, mortgage payments, equipment repairs, poor honey production, another difficult winter, another financial crisis. I had wired money without hesitation, thousands, then tens of thousands, then more than I wanted to calculate. Because family helps family. At least that's what I'd always been taught. Halfway through dinner, my mother asked a question. It sounded innocent, but the room went strangely quiet afterward. So, Emily, how long are you planning to stay? I looked up. Every eye at the table seemed focused on me. Waiting. Measuring. Calculating. I forced a smile. I'm not sure yet. The truth was I hadn't figured anything out. My medical discharge had only recently become official. I was still learning how to build a life outside the military. Still trying to understand who I was now. Still trying to imagine a future that looked nothing like the one I'd planned. My father set down his fork. The sound echoed louder than it should have. 3 weeks out and already looking for help. The room froze. I blinked. What? His eyes narrowed. You heard me. I stared at him. Certain I had misunderstood. I'm not asking for any. A bitter laugh escaped him. Really? I felt heat rise into my chest. I spent 10 years sending money to this family. There I finally said it. The thing nobody seemed willing to mention. The room became even quieter. My father leaned back. That money is gone. The words hit me harder than expected. Gone? Spent on what? His answer arrived instantly. Things that mattered. Something inside me tightened. What mattered more than Grandpa's farm? Robert looked at me as if I had asked an offensive question. You come home broken. His eyes flicked toward my cane. You come home broke. He folded his arms. And now you're sitting here acting like somebody owes you something. The words hung in the air. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended me. I looked around the table. Lauren stared into her wine glass. Ethan examined the tablecloth. My mother suddenly became fascinated with folding her napkin. Not one person met my eyes. That hurt more than anything my father had said. I gave this family everything I had. My voice remained calm. Military training teaches you strange skills. One of them is how to keep your voice steady when your world is collapsing. Robert's expression hardened. Then he said the word that changed everything. You're a burden. Just like that. No hesitation, no emotion, no regret. A burden. 10 years of sacrifice reduced to a single word. I waited. Surely someone would object. Surely someone would tell him he had gone too far. Surely someone would say something. Nobody did. Then Robert pointed toward the door. Get out. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I had heard. Not because it was impossible. Because it was so easy for him, as if he had rehearsed it. As if he had been waiting for the opportunity. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet. The movement took longer than it once would have. I picked up my cane, grabbed my duffel, and turned toward the door. The gifts remained on the table. At the doorway, I looked back one final time. Not a single member of my family met my eyes. Not one, so I left. Outside, the cold December air hit my face like a slap. I stood on the sidewalk and stared into the darkness. For a few seconds, I couldn't think. Then training took over. Assess. Move. I checked my bank account. $61. That was it. $61 in a body that still required medical appointments. The savings I should have had after 10 years of military service didn't exist. Because I had sent nearly everything away. One transfer at a time. One sacrifice at a time. One lie at a time. And suddenly a question appeared. Where had all that money actually gone? I thought I knew. My grandfather Henry's bee farm. The struggling farm. The failing farm. The farm I'd spent 10 years helping save. There was only one problem. I had never actually confirmed any of it. Every piece of information had come through my father. Every single piece. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. There was only one place left to go. One person left I trusted. My grandfather. That night, I boarded a bus heading toward the Oregon hills. Hours later, after a long ride through darkness and winter fields, I stepped off near a small gas station and began walking the remaining distance. The road stretched ahead under a pale moon. My cane clicked against the frozen ground. The farther I walked, the stronger a strange feeling became. Something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it. I just knew it. Eventually the farm appeared in the distance. The old farmhouse, the barn, the rows of beehives. The familiar landscape from my childhood. And immediately something felt wrong. Not bad wrong, the opposite. Nothing looked desperate. Nothing looked abandoned. Nothing looked bankrupt. The buildings were maintained. The fences stood straight. The property looked healthy, successful, alive. Not like a farm hanging on by a thread. The realization made my pulse quicken. I climbed the porch steps, knocked on the door. A light came on inside. Footsteps approached. The door opened. My grandfather Henry stood there, older than I remembered, grayer, smaller. But his eyes were exactly the same. For several seconds he simply stared. His gaze moved from my face to my cane. Then back again. Confusion crossed his features, deep confusion. The kind that appears when reality suddenly stops making sense. Emily? His voice cracked. What in the world are you doing here? I swallowed. Dad threw me out. Shock flashed across his face, then concern. Then something else. Something darker. I came to help with the farm. The confusion returned instantly. The farm? I nodded. The bee farm. Henry stared at me. For several long seconds he said nothing. Then he spoke 5 words that changed my entire life. The farm isn't in trouble. And in that moment, standing on my grandfather's porch in the freezing Oregon night, I realized that everything I believed about the last 10 years might have been a lie. The farm isn't in trouble. For a moment, I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. The cold wind moved across the porch. My grandfather stood in the doorway and I stared at him. What? Henry frowned. The farm's been doing fine for years. I felt my stomach drop. No, the word escaped before I could stop it. No, that's not possible. Henry stepped aside. Come inside, Emily. I followed him into the warm kitchen. The familiar scent of coffee and wood smoke filled the room. The place looked exactly the way I remembered from childhood. Comfortable, simple, peaceful. Nothing about it looked like a property on the edge of foreclosure. Nothing. Henry poured coffee into 2 mugs, then sat across from me. I took a deep breath. Dad said you needed help. His expression slowly changed. Help with what? The mortgage. Henry blinked. What mortgage? The equipment. What equipment? The debt. The old man stared at me, then shook his head slowly, carefully, as though he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Emily, his voice softened. I paid off this farm almost 20 years ago. My heart stopped. The room seemed to tilt. For several seconds I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The number that flashed through my head was terrifying. 10 years. 10 years of paychecks. 10 years of deployments. 10 years of sacrifice. 10 years of money. Gone. Then where did it go? The question barely came out. Henry looked genuinely confused. What money? I told him everything. The transfers, the emergencies, the stories, the promises, the reasons my father had given me every month. The more I talked, the paler Henry became. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. My God, I stopped. What? The old man rubbed his face, then looked directly at me. Emily, I never received a single dollar. The words hit harder than the explosion that took my leg, because explosions happen in an instant. This happened over 10 years. 10 years of trust, 10 years of manipulation, 10 years of believing I was helping someone who had never received a penny. I sat there unable to speak, unable to process what I had just learned. Then Henry said something else, something almost worse. Your father told me you wanted nothing to do with me. I stared. What? He said the military changed you. I couldn't move. He told me you stopped writing. I felt sick. Henry stood and walked into another room. A minute later, he returned carrying a box. He placed it on the table. Inside were dozens of envelopes, every single one addressed to him, in my handwriting, returned unopened. Every birthday card, every Christmas card, every photograph, every letter, all sent back, none delivered. 10 years. 10 years of communication erased. 10 years of lies. I finally understood. My father hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen relationships. He had stolen time. He had stolen family. And none of us even knew it. That night I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking, calculating, remembering. Everything suddenly made sense. The expensive wedding my sister somehow afforded, the renovations, the vacations, the trucks, the boat, the constant upgrades, the mysterious good years, my money, all of it. By morning something had changed inside me. The anger was still there, but beneath it was clarity, for the first time in years. Clarity. I wasn't going back, not to Salem, not to Robert Carter's house, not to the life I thought I had. I was done. At breakfast, Henry made eggs and coffee. Then he looked out the window. You can stay. I opened my mouth to protest. He raised a hand. Not charity. I stopped. I'm getting old. He smiled. My hands shake. His eyes drifted toward the hives, and I could use some help. For the first time in months, I smiled. A real smile, not a polite one, not a forced one, a real one. And so I stayed. Days became weeks, weeks became months. Henry taught me everything. About bees, about honey, about patience, about healing. Most importantly, he taught me something no therapist had ever managed to explain. You don't rebuild your life all at once. You rebuild it one day at a time, one choice at a time, one step at a time. Just like bees build a hive, slowly, carefully, patiently, spring arrived. Then, summer the farm grew, so did I. My brother Ryan eventually visited. Unlike the others, he apologized. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but sincerely. That was enough. Together we started improving the farm, creating products, selling honey, building something real, something ours. Meanwhile, the truth slowly spread. Small towns have a way of uncovering secrets. People talked. Questions were asked. Stories didn't match. Eventually, everyone learned exactly what Robert Carter had done. He denied everything. Of course he did. People like him always do. But evidence has a way of surviving. The returned letters, the financial records, the timelines, the witnesses. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to exist. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year after I arrived, Robert drove to the farm. He hadn't come to apologize. I knew that before he even got out of the car. He wanted the land, nothing more, nothing less. The developer's offers had grown, the property was valuable, and he wanted control. What he didn't know was that years earlier, Henry had legally protected the farm, protected it from sale, protected it from developers, protected it from Robert. The moment he learned he couldn't touch it, his mask finally slipped. For the first time, everyone saw him clearly. Not the father, not the provider, not the victim, the truth. Just a man who had spent years taking from everyone around him. Eventually, he left, alone, angry, defeated. And that was the last time I saw him. People often ask whether I forgave him. The answer surprises them. Yes, I did. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness simply means refusing to carry the weight forever. I forgave him for my own peace, not for his. A year later, our honey business became successful. 2 years later, it expanded. 3 years later, it supported several families, including mine. One evening, I sat on the porch beside Henry watching the sunset across the fields. The hives hummed softly in the distance. The same sound that once reminded me of explosions now reminded me of life. Henry smiled. You know something? What? He pointed toward the farm. You saved this place. I shook my head. No. He smiled wider. We saved each other, and he was right. I came to that farm believing I had lost everything. My career, my money, my future, my family. Instead, I found something far more valuable. The truth, a purpose, a home. and the people who genuinely cared whether I stayed or left. Years later, after Henry passed peacefully in his sleep, I inherited the responsibility of protecting the farm. Not because I was owed anything, not because of blood, because I had earned it, the same way he had, the same way every generation before us had. Today, the sign at the entrance still reads *Henry's Honey Farm. I never changed it. Every morning, when I walk past that sign, I remember the night I arrived with $61, a cane, and nowhere to go. I remember standing on that porch believing my life was over. I remember the door opening. And I remember the lesson that changed everything. Family isn't always the people who share your last name. Family is the people who open the door when you have nowhere else to go. And sometimes the greatest thing you'll ever lose is the lie that was keeping you from finding the life you were meant to live.